Hi, we're Bonnie and Greg Dixon with Health Pioneer Theater, and we're here with our friend Jerry Smith, and we're going to, well, Bonnie, why don't you take it from here?
Well, today we have a very, very interesting interview that Jerry did with Marta Boyette and Amber Dennis in the natural products and foods industry. And Jerry, tell us a little bit about this interview and why these two women were so important for the industry in the Northwest and, in fact, for the entire U.S. and beyond.
Absolutely. Well, Marta and Amber did a lot early on in the formation of what became the natural products industry. They were in it with their heart and soul, and Marta was earlier in it, and Amber kind of took over when Marta did other things. But in the early days, we're talking about the 70s, Marta came to Oregon, and she'll tell that story. And she was very, both of them were leaders in inspiration, innovation, and creation. And their stories reveal that. Really, it's possible that it wouldn't be a Provender organization, which many in the Northwest know is a group of all types of retailers, manufacturers, producers, farmers, and so forth. And it tells us a lot about why things grew so well in the Pacific Northwest. So there's lots of stories. In fact, we're going to divide this into 3 parts. This is part number 1, the early beginnings. And next week, we'll have the second part. And we'll talk about that at the end of this. So we're going to show about 20 minutes, 25 minutes or so of this. And please enjoy. And remember, if you missed this or someone else did, pass it on. They can see it also.
So I grew up probably like you in the 1950s and 1960s America. So my parents were the post-Depression, post-war generation. When they grew up, they were in the Depression. There wasn't a lot of variety in food. And then during the war years, certain things were rationed, and the dairy industry and the corporate food industry really got a strong grip on the country and started making margarine because no one could get butter, that kind of thing. So by the time I came along, this was normal to eat food that had been highly processed and was perhaps a substitute for the types of whole foods that my grandparents' generation had grown up on. So, and that was just normal in 1950s and 1960s America. But for some reason, I was the kind of kid who at the breakfast table would be eating my Cheerios or my whatever it was, the Frosted Flakes. And I would always read every word on the cereal box. I had to read every word. And so I read all the ingredients. And you may recall, if you did the same thing, that there was a tremendously long list of stuff that was a total mystery. It just came out of the chemistry lab and you had no idea what it was. And I remember sitting and thinking, I wonder what all that stuff is. What does it do for me? Why is it necessary in the food? And then when I was 18, the summer after high school, I had a boyfriend who was a few years older than me, and he was investigating macrobiotics. He was studying macrobiotic foods and cooking, and introduced me to this whole different idea about food. And I was fascinated. I didn't go whole hog for being macrobiotic, but I was quite fascinated, and was introduced to the idea of natural food stores. But there wasn't much around where I lived. I lived near Washington, D.C. at the time, and there was not much in suburban Maryland that made those kinds of things available. But lo and behold, at age 19, 1972, along comes in my neighborhood a little chain vitamin store, which this company no longer exists. I think they were gobbled up by GNC at some point, but they were called Nature Food Center. And they had, they're actually more interesting than a GNC. So pardon me, GNC, but it's true. And they had very interesting stuff. They had, maybe 40% of their stock was supplements and bodybuilding materials. But they also stocked a lot of whole foods. There, in those days, it was Shiloh Farms on the East Coast that made the best bread I'd ever had. And then there were things like Pure Goat ice cream, awesome stuff. And while I worked there, I got a job there. And while I worked there, I worked for a very creative woman who was my boss, and I became the assistant. And we transformed the store further in the direction of food. We brought in produce, and we brought in the output of organic farms, and we brought in, and nobody knew what organic was then. It didn't have a definition, but we and our friends had some idea of what we thought organic was. So we brought in stuff that was nominally organic and certainly was probably more pesticide free than the other produce that was available. So we started produce. We started bringing in more and more herbs of exotic types, and we started bringing in more cheeses. And that was back in the days before we all had pocket calculators, and we had random weight cheese. And to save time, I taught myself how to do complicated math in my head so I could calculate the weight and price on the random weight cheese without resorting to long division. And I got really good at that, so I can still do that. And the herbs, similarly, the bulk herbs. We were near Washington, D.C., and so we were able to connect with the nascent businesses in the Black Muslim community there. And they made wonderful products. We brought in all the produce of Shabazz Bakery, and that got to be very popular. And they made this wonderful submarine sandwich, whole wheat loaf. And we got into the business of making these awesome submarine sandwiches. I could give you the whole menu still.
You've got quite a memory.
And, yeah. And the cool thing was, now you have to think about this in terms of what the inflation rate has been since 1972, okay? So think about when we started that store, the sales, the gross income for the store was about $2,000 a week. And we pushed it in very short order up to $10,000 a week.
Wow.
And our parent company, NFC, did not know what we were doing. They had to send people to investigate why we were so successful. And it was obvious. We were selling real food, and we loved it. And the customers loved it, and the community came in. And one of the joys of working in natural foods I discovered while still a teenager was talking to the older people. So you think of us now as pioneers in our field. But at that time, the older people were my pioneers. And for example, the old farmer, Farmer John, we never knew his last name. And he used to come in. There were certain things he always got, and I would always help him because he was totally grumpy and no one else wanted to deal with him. But if you really showed an interest in him, he would open up and talk about farming and how he did things. And then my special joy was there was a whole collection from our area of these older Black ladies whose families had lived there for I don't know how many generations. And they had all this herbal lore that I knew nothing about. And they had different names for the herbs that I'd never heard. And I'll confess, I used to try to eavesdrop on their conversations with each other so I could learn things. I was just fascinated with them and their ways of speaking. So I was having a lot of fun, and I loved it. And then I transplanted to the West Coast, and at age 23 was just audacious enough not to know that it was hard to start your own business and make it succeed in a small timber town in Oregon. So not knowing that I would fail, I did that and didn't fail, although we came darn close to it for a while. I'm going to pause here and ask you, so how did you get started in all this?
Well, I too read the cereal box, but I was not making any connections about chemicals. I was just bored. And so I came here, I think I was 20, to visit a friend who had moved here. A whole lot of us I worked in a free clinic in Southern California, and a whole group of us decided that we were going to move to Oregon after the executive director of the clinic moved to Oregon. We came to visit him and went, "Whoa, it's gorgeous here. It's beautiful." And the people were friendly. They'd let you in traffic. They'd let you use the bathroom if you're shopping. It was a whole different world where people were kind. And I really, really liked it. And so I was in Eugene for a while, and I had an opportunity to move to the country and move to this place. I rented a place on Railroad Road in Cottage Grove. And I got hired as the executive director of the helpline in Cottage Grove. And it was a typical helpline where people call in suicide and drug abuse and, all kinds of things that people have issues with. And so one of the things I did was as the new executive director, I trained a whole lot of ladies who went to church, nice white liberal Presbyterians and Methodists that were living down there who wanted to help people. And I trained them about subjects and issues that they were not familiar with. And there was a history with this hotline, and part of the history involved you. And you used to be the training coordinator. And I had just come to town, and I was shopping in your store. And I guess somebody had told you that I got hired.
Someone told me that you were the new director, and the former director, well, I'm not going to go into all the chicanery that went on before you came along,
Yeah.
But I was really hoping that what the people who originally founded the helpline, including myself, had envisioned could be revived, because the outgoing regime had destroyed it.
Yeah.
And so I was really hoping to connect with you, but I didn't know, I'd heard your name, but I didn't know how to reach you. So she came into my health food store and bought something and wrote a check for it. And when I saw the name on the check, I'll never forget
kind of
this.
accosted me.
I'll never forget this, because I was supposed to be assisting the director with debriefing and keeping people focused on the helpline, and I had been shut out. So when I saw the name on the check, I said, "You're Amber." And she goes, "Yeah." Yeah. And I said, I didn't know, I was so overcome. I just didn't know what to say or how to explain myself. I said, "I'm supposed to help you."
Well, that's great. And as it turns out, in a much bigger way in my life, you have helped
We
me.
have been helping each other ever since,
Yeah.
throughout the natural food industry.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and so I got my natural foods, and I got an assistant in the process, and in the process of rebuilding that organization. When I inherited, they had interviewed me, and I had a lot of not natural foods, social service experience from working in the clinic and other places I volunteered, and they passed me. I didn't make the first cut. They hired this woman who her big experience was that she was a Boy Scout leader. And so she emptied the financial. She drained the finances and tried to turn it into a religious hotline, and it had county money, and county money has to be,
non-sectarian.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was funded with public money, and it had to be non-sectarian, and so they brought me in to build it back up and turn it into county sanctioned. And you helped me do that, and that was the beginning of our relationship. And it wasn't enough money for me to live on, and so you hired me to help do window dressing.
Yes.
At night. We were the elves at night, so we would go rebuild the window out at the retail store at Sunshine General Store that you owned.
That's right. I hired you to be the behind-the-scenes project elf for the store and to do whatever needed doing that didn't involve the daily chores.
Yeah. So that was really helpful because it supplemented my income. Mm-hmm. And somewhere along there, I also started teaching preschool. So I'm kind of a Jill of all trades there. I kind of do a lot of things. But I also did childcare for conferences and events. And since I was working at a preschool, I had some experience. And didn't you hire me for childcare for Spirit Path?
Yes.
Yeah. So there were we had some overlaps there where I was working conferences as a childcare person, but also I have a lot of different skills. So I would volunteer to help with registration or to help with putting packets together, or, anything. I mean,
So in 1990, I was newly hired to be the grocery manager for Sundance Natural Foods. And I was attending a trade show in the Tacoma area. And at the trade show, it turned out to be convenient that we convene a Provender board meeting in my hotel room. Now, Provender Alliance was the educational association that was located in the Northwest and focused in the natural foods industry. This is not, as it turns out, something that is common in other parts of the world to have such an organization, and it has played a very key role in making the Northwest a leader in natural foods. So during that board meeting, we needed to hire a conference coordinator, and everyone was in despair because they just didn't know anyone who could have such a broad skill set to do all the things that we perceived needed to be done to make this a great conference.
and about subjects and issues that they were not familiar with.
Hey, Jerry.
Which one? Jerry Reamer, Jerry Allen Bowling, or Jerry Smith?
We got Siri
That's
jumping in here. Yeah, we seem to be spinning our wheels here. So you're going to have to speak for them. You can make it fill in the dialogue.
Okay. Well, There's, I tell you what, if they go to our YouTube channel, which is found on our home page, they can see it in its entirety, not rebroadcast live. But basically, we're going to try the second part next week, which is, let's see, Provender conference stories. But the inception of Provender had a lot to do with different gatherings that people wanted to have a educationally motivated and sharing experience. And that's kind of how Provender got off the ground, is the short version of that. So what I encourage everybody to do is to go to our YouTube channel, and you'll see this. You can watch the first part or all of it, whatever you do. We have I have a shortcut to that, but I haven't memorized it.
That's
Let's see.
naturalhealthmovement.org.
No, the shortcut, but .org/. They can see the YouTube channel there. Yes, you're right. The link is on our homepage, our original master page.
Yeah.
So,
well, Jerry, one thing I want to say about having gone to the Provender several years when I worked for a large natural foods distribution company,
yes,
and also as a retailer, it was a wonderful, caring group of people that really and truly, from the heart, wanted better food, quality food that was healthy for everyone. And it was really a great experience. I happened to go to one in Port Townsend once, and it was just really, it made it a lovely experience, educational, and with lectures from experts there. And truly, when you gather a group of people together of like mind, wonderful things can happen. And that's what I saw at Provender. They were truly wanting to better the grocery industry, as it were. And they actually, the impact has been profound when you think about many regular retail grocery stores now carry a natural product section. And
sometimes
whole
that's
aisles are dedicated now.
True. And taking credit for it.
Oh, yeah.
Ironically. Well, I think that one of the most profound things that Marta said that in this section here is, not knowing I could fail, she proceeded. And that has a lot to do with the complexion of the Pacific Northwest in particular. So if you want to know what helped the organic standards get off the ground, actually get mileage, and including our Oregon tilth and how that interacted and became a body that was locally run and so forth, you want to see more of these. So what I recommend is that you tune in next week, and we will show the second part, which is Provender conference stories. And the third part talks a lot about the organic movement and other interesting stories. So it's always available on our YouTube channel. You can always watch it. And we hope to see you next week.
Absolutely. Happy holidays. Take care. Be safe. And we look forward to seeing you next week.